Hi, I'm Carl Franklin. I've had more than a few requests to talk about reporting on the show, and I avoided it mostly because to do it well, you should use a commercial reporting package. That said, reports are a critical part of any real-world application. So when Blazor Train fan Thomas Smith reached out to me to tell me he'd created a Blazor app using the Devexpress Reporting library, I of course invited him to show it off. So in this episode of Blazor Train, Thomas is going to show you his app and how he implemented a report viewer and designer and deployed it into an Azure app service. And that's coming up right now, right here on Blazor Train. See, I said it. See? Shut up. Blazor Train! My guest today is Thomas Smith. Thomas, you came to me out of band and said, hey, I really like Blazor Train, and I've implemented what I think is a really cool application using Blazor. And it also happens to use Devexpress Reporting, which I haven't talked about reporting at all. And I thought this would be a really good opportunity to show a real application that uses a reporting tool of any kind. The reporting is one of those things that you probably shouldn't do by yourself, like from scratch. Do you agree with that?
Definitely agree with that. That would be quite a bit of challenge.
Yeah. So obviously you evaluated a bunch of reporting tools and settled on Devexpress. So why was that?
So Devexpress Reporting was really easy and the documentation was great, straightforward. I was able to drop it in. Add a few components here and there, make my changes, set up the report as I wanted to. And the way that you can structure the report is really similar to previous reporting tools that I used in the past. So I just picked it up and started going. The client really liked the outputs as well.
Cool. So what is the application? Is it Blazor Server or Blazor WebAssembly?
So the application is a Blazor Server application.
And why did you choose that?
I went with Blazor Server because we really need the information to be hidden on the server.
Yeah, so rather than create an elaborate API layer, you just decided to take it easy on yourself and just keep everything on the server side.
Correct. The thing was just to get started for now. And if we think that we want to scale it out larger, we can take that on later.
Okay. And what kind of database are you using on the back end?
So I'm using MongoDB on the back end.
And are you using like the repository pattern or any sort of have any sort of data access layer between your Blazor app and the database?
So I'm not using an API layer, but I am using a repository pattern. I started with some generic components and built it out from there.
So can you just show us the app running in the browser?
Sure, let's get started.
Whoa, so that's Visual Studio Code. No, wait, that's Visual Studio for Mac. Are you a Mac guy or did you just want to do something different?
Well, typically when I'm in the office, everything's Microsoft and enterprise. But me personally, since I've been taking this journey of entrepreneurship and trying to figure out software on my own, I figured, hey, I'm always making music on my Mac. How about I start writing code on my Mac as well?
That's cool. So a double challenge, right? And just out of curiosity, how long have you been a developer?
So I've been developing for about 4 years professionally now.
Okay. And when did you start learning about Blazor?
I started learning about Blazor in 2019. I originally started in Excel VBA, progressed to VB.NET due to some CAD automation tools I was working on at that time. And then I found out about something called a .NET platform, and I was introduced to C# through a colleague of mine. And then eventually in 2019, it was brought to my attention that you could actually start using C# to develop your front end. And I was like, wow, okay, that's great because I love C#. So
very good. So can we start by running the application and then dive into the code after that?
Sure. Let's go ahead and run it in debug mode here.
So is Atlanta Custom Collision a real business or is this a fictional thing for the demo?
So Atlanta Custom Collision is actually a real business. It's a family-owned business. With me kind of being in the marketplace for the first time as a software developer, I figured I'd use this as a specimen to kind of take to different interviews to explain my architectural decisions and things like that. So that's how I've been using it.
Very cool.
So as it pertains to an auto body shop, a new project is simply a repair order.
Mm-hmm.
So this is going to be the repair order page, and this is simply just a Blazor edit form.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so the first thing we need to do is go ahead and fill out this information. But of course, I've got a little button down here that'll automatically fill in some information for us.
Wait. Side swiped a rose bush and fell in love?
Yep.
That's funny.
Yeah, I figured my lady will like that one.
Yeah, nice.
So we could go ahead and select a vehicle.
Whoa, that's a lot of data. Where'd you get that vehicle data?
So this vehicle data actually came from an app called Back4App. I don't know much about the business, but when I was on an extensive search looking for a car database backend, and I saw some different options, of course, Excel and all that, but this was the easiest option, and I just wound up pushing this to my MongoDB database because it was a JSON file. So
great. Easy.
Now that we've got our vehicle selected, let's go ahead and go to the bottom. We'll confirm that the customer agrees with the information that we provided.
Mm-hmm.
We'll hit save.
Is that Blazor Toast?
That is.
Nice. Chris Sandy.
So now that we saved that information, we can go ahead and go to history.
Mm-hmm.
We've got that information here. Of course, we've got our edit button, our delete button. So if we hit edit, that information will appear, and we got that toast notification again, letting us know, the ID.
Yeah.
And then let's go ahead and take a look at the document, because that's what we're here for today.
Yeah.
So here's the document that actually generated right in the browser, which is really cool.
Very cool.
So this just shows a little thumbnail, but we could actually hit this printer button and it'll show an official print preview here.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, we have the option of exporting it to different.
Whoa, let me see that list. Excel, old Excel, new Excel, RTF, rich text format, MHT, HTML, text, CSV, an image, or a Word doc. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, and funny enough, all of these options came up as default, but you do have the option, and it's inside of the reporting documentation. You do have the option of hiding some of these things and putting custom buttons and things like that. We'll go ahead and say PDF. And another option that this allows you to do is go ahead and automatically name that file. So if I actually look at my downloads folder, we could see it actually named it repair order, the ID, and then the date. So that's another cool feature there.
Nice. Okay, so now I know with reporting systems, sometimes you can create the format of the report, and sometimes you can let the customer create their own custom reports right in the tool. Which option did you go for?
That's correct. Funny enough, originally I actually created this reporting on Windows side, and I just went with the typical REPX format where you actually just edit it in Visual Studio. But in this case, I challenged myself to create the report using the actual report designer that the client would use. So that way I'll know exactly the different options that they have.
So you gave your customer the opportunity to modify this report.
That's correct. And that'll be that report designer page here.
Wow.
So if we look at this report here, we actually see that this date range has something funky going on here. So let's go ahead and use this as an opportunity to remove that.
Okay.
If I go to my report designer here, by default, this report designer is going to go ahead and pull up that template. And so we could actually go to this date range, and we can see the date range here. And we have the option of setting up our data. So this little symbol here actually represents that it's tied to the data source.
Right.
So let's take a look at that. So you can see my text expression here. This is an expression editor. This all comes in the box. No extra code blocks or anything to put in. I'll just go ahead and remove this for now. Just to keep the cycle going.
All right.
And then we have a nice little preview feature.
Yeah.
And we can see that date range is now gone. Now, the information that's being populated here is just some sample data in the meantime so that we can always see a true representation of the report as far as sizing, formatting, et cetera, et cetera.
There's another thing that I like about the report designer, which is the snapping. And you can see the grid in the background, but show the people how you just laid this out and then pressed a couple of buttons and everything lined up.
Oh, yeah. So really useful feature here. you could go ahead and just, let's say if this was, I guess I have to zoom in a bit. Let's zoom in. So if it were the case that this was a little offline, you could actually hit this button, which is align to grid.
Yeah.
And you can hit this button over here too to size the grid if it was a little smaller. We'll go ahead and put that back. So that's a really cool feature. So another thing that happens is if any of these blocks overlap, it'll turn red. And that's a really nice feature as well. So let's go ahead and drag that out a little bit. Drag this over here a little bit, and we'll press that same button to resize. Right?
Nice.
I'll drag it a little further. A little further there. Right, and now that red goes away to say that we're no longer overlapping. So that was really thoughtful of them to put that feature in there. I really like that. And we've got something right here, so boom.
Setting up report designers isn't, something that people like to do. They don't want to spend a lot of time doing it. So every little shortcut helps.
Absolutely, especially when it comes to the designer's eye, because who has that, right? And then they also provide some nice little functions that come in the box here, current date and time, and also the page. So
for the footer,
take a look at that. Yeah, if we take a look at that print preview again, you can see we've got the date and we've got the page down there.
All right, so we have the ability to print and download in various formats, the ability for the customer to modify the report. And I also imagine they can create new reports from the data if they want to.
Absolutely.
So let's figure out what all is required of you, the developer, to make this feature happen.
All right, let's go through that. So as I said earlier, Devexpress makes it really easy to get started with this reporting tool. What I typically like to do is go to Google, type in Blazor Components, Devexpress Blazor Components, and that'll bring you to this page. So if we scroll down, we'll see we'll have reports. So we'll click reports. You have a few different options here. Me, myself, and what you've seen in this demo so far is the report viewer native. They have a JavaScript-based option there.
Okay.
And then this report designer, which is also JavaScript-based.
Okay.
So those are the two that we've used. They provide some demos here just so you can kind of click and get started in it and kind of foresee what your user experience would be. But let's go ahead and check out the documentation. Now, for the first thing, let's look at the viewer. So looking at this report viewer documentation is really easy to get started and it's pretty straightforward. So we can see that the Devexpress Blazor Reporting is in this particular namespace. So we can go ahead and go to our NuGet manager and add that particular package here.
So what's involved in, you've purchased the Devexpress tool. How do you access it securely in Visual Studio?
Okay, so to actually access that, we're going to want to go ahead and click this link. That's going to walk you through how to go ahead and get your credentials from that NuGet feed. And once you're locked in that NuGet feed, you'll actually have access to the project templates and all the other NuGet packages to go ahead and get started.
Great. So a little bit of setup in the beginning as you're a new customer, but then it's just a NuGet package.
Correct.
Cool.
All right. So as you know, we're in a Blazor server project. So that Blazor server project has this imports Razor page. We're going to go ahead and add that using statement there. After we do that, we're going to go to our startup file, the configure services method, and add this method here. And that'll give us that access to the different components that we need to get started.
Okay.
We're also going to go to the configure method within that startup class and add this endpoints.mapped controller statement if you don't already have that in there already.
Okay.
So this piece of code here is what's going to actually allow you to use storage with the report viewer.
And the storage isn't your database. It's for storing those reports themselves, like the templates that your customers are going to create and you're going to create, right?
Correct. So then after we get that done, we create that controller. We can go ahead and make a Razor page and add this Razor component to it.
Okay.
And of course, after we add that Razor component to it, we're going to want to go ahead and add this DX Blazor Reporting components.css. And this is the actual file that holds the location of the icons that we saw on that report.
Great.
Now, after that, we're going to need to specify a report. And so a report is a REPX file.
Okay.
And so we can go ahead and drag that into our project, get the location of that particular file, and bind it to our report. Would you like to see how I went about doing that?
Absolutely.
Okay. So I've got a components folder here, dialogues, and I created a report viewer dialog.
Okay.
So inside of this, you can see we've got that code that we added to get access to those icons and things. We've got our DX report viewer. For me, I've put a specification of zoom equals 0.5 just because it shows up the cleanest when it first starts up, regardless of device. Inside of this onInitialize method, this is where we went ahead and set up that report. So the first thing we're going to do is specify the report template file that we created.
Right.
Then we're going to locate that file here. And then that's when we actually instantiate the report itself. And we tie it to a data source.
Yeah.
And so because we have a repair order as the class, we tied that repair order to it. Side note here, when you're tying data sources to a report, it does need to be within a list.
Okay.
Okay. If you try to do it without it being a list and just say repair order, it won't work. Okay. So the next few steps we see down here is how I set up my actual report name that the client sees when they hit that export button.
Right.
You can see I've got my date, the report name. I went ahead and grabbed the report order ID there, concatenated that string.
And that defines the report name.
Correct. And that's actually all you need to do to set up that initial report.
Seems pretty easy to me.
Now the information down here, it's optional. If you wanted to set up a customized toolbar with different icons and things like that. I didn't necessarily go that route, but that's great that we had that option.
So you didn't have to do any special code in order to get them to be able to download PDF or a docx file. That's all just handled?
Correct.
And what about the designer?
Okay, let's take a look at the documentation for the designer. Okay, so for this report designer, we're going to be within the same namespace, but we're going to need to go ahead and set up that NuGet package for Devexpress Blazor.reporting JS-based controls.
Because this is all JavaScript.
Correct. As opposed to the viewer that was native. Now the designer, all you need to do is copy this, place it on a page, and it appears.
So you bind it to the same report. Is that by report name, or is there other code to do the binding?
Let's go ahead and take a look at my code.
Yeah.
We've got a few little options here that I added myself, but just added that data source. And then we've got some widget settings here. Now below, we've got the function to actually add the data source. The data source I decided to go with was a JSON file. I just so happen to be using MongoDB, so it makes it really easy to just go ahead and download the JSON from MongoDB.
Yeah.
And just use it inside of my project.
Okay.
So just like we did before, when it came to kind of recognizing templates and things like that, we want to go ahead and get that file path. Here we're going to specify the JSON file name, tie it to the data source, and there's all different type of data sources.
Cool.
I decided to go with JSON. We're going to fill it, and then we're going to add it. And that was it. And we actually run this add data source inside of our onInitialize method.
Okay, that's drop dead, brain dead simple as far as I'm concerned. Did you have any gotchas along the way that you want to share?
Yeah, so I do want to share a few things because I actually deployed this to Azure App Services to productionize it. And so what you're going to want to do in order to do that, so you're going to want to add this piece of code if you're using Azure to deploy your web apps. And this will basically make the designer compatible with that particular infrastructure.
Interesting. I'm trying to figure out why, but they have their own reasons, I guess. But that's very, very good advice. You know, it's usually it comes down to stuff like that. You know, oh, you have to do this.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. So, yeah, I see your setup there. You're also a music producer in Atlanta?
Yeah, I've actually been in love with music since I was a child, and I've been doing it professionally here in Atlanta, Georgia for about 5 years at a studio called Billboard Music Studio, where I've recorded artists like T.I., Young Dro, Dash Loaf, whole host of artists. So it's really fun. That's what I like to do on my spare time.
That's really cool. Do you find that you have to do one or the other, you know, and switch them off in order to stay sane? I know I do. If I program for too long, I have to do music. And if I do music for too long, I have to write code.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, thank you very much for sharing your work with us. And it's really great that you got to help out, you know, a family-run business in Atlanta and got to sharpen your skills at the same time. It's a wonderful thing that you've done there. So thank you.
Thank you, Carl. And thank you for exposing us all to the Blazor Train.
You bet. And hey, just before we leave, I'm going to put your email address up on the screen and maybe your Twitter handle too, so people can get in touch with you if they want some music produced or want some Blazor apps written. Thanks again.
Thanks for having me, Carl.
You bet.
Bye-bye now.
Back to you in the studio, Carl. So next week is when .NET 6 is being released. Therefore, I'm going to take a week off to digest the new stuff, and the following week, I'll be releasing new episodes for both Blazor Train and the .NET Show. Hey, thanks for riding the rails with me today. This is where I jump off. I'll see you next time. Blazor Train!